you? Welcome to Geekism and welcome back to Nuna Kanata. This is our North American Canadian tundra style conservation park, I suppose. It's not quite a zoo really, and there's a bit of everything going on in this video, to be honest, and I don't quite get anything finished. You'll realise why a little bit later on, but first things first, this what we're watching here was recorded, oh man, about a week ago, and I decided to take the second half of the river here and turn it into another grizzly bear habitat. A few people mentioned this, that if you are doing like a bear conservation project or you know, like a bear rehabilitation project, something like that, chances are you aren't just sat there with one bear, which is currently what we've got. That's a great point. So we're going to carry on that river down and basically just keep splitting it up, and we're going to have a couple more bears, probably maybe a couple of female bears in this one that could maybe even reproduce or something like that. But yeah, here what we've got is the cave that is at the back of the original one. What I wanted to do is make that more of a man-made structure and actually have it so that there's a second cave there for more animals that you can actually go down now into and see. Now I'm not too sure how much of this actually got filmed, but we'll have to take a good look at it. So you can actually go down underground now, and actually there's a window into the cave section. And again, like I say, unfortunately, it's very much unfinished because the first sort of session I got with the game this week was this, and then after this, the Arctic Pack was announced. It's been a while since I've actually been in here. The Arctic Pack was announced, and obviously, the Arctic Pack is pretty much Nuna Kanata, the DLC. Like, it's for North American animals, for sort of tundra and Arctic animals, and lots of like wood scenery and stuff. So I kind of put Nuna Kanata to bed for a bit and thought, well, I might as well wait for the Arctic Pack and kind of see what that brings us and see what we can do with it. So we actually decided to go for the polar bear. There's 4 animals in the Arctic Pack: reindeer or caribou, I suppose they would be here, being in North America, the Dall sheep, the Arctic wolf, they're sort of white and slightly smaller versions of the timber wolves, and then obviously the polar bear. And I thought, you know, polar bear is probably a big ticket one out of all those, so I thought I would start working on a polar bear habitat. My word, has there been a bit of sort of back and forth in the community about the polar bear habitat this week, for 2 reasons. One was much more vocal than the other, and I actually think the one that wasn't so vocal is probably the more important one. Basically, the size requirements for the polar bear were pretty big. It was something like 8,000 meters or something like 12,000 meters and then 4,000 meters squared water or something. Really huge area, and a lot of people were sort of opening up their franchise parks or their challenge parks, and they were trying to put a polar bear habitat in, and it was pretty much doubling the size of the zoo. You know, these zoos that had like 6, 7, 8, 9 habitats in, and then the polar bear would be the size of all of them put together. And obviously that isn't particularly realistic for a zoo. Before Frontier came out and said, no, you know what, we've done a lot of work regarding research into this, and that is the kind of space they need to have, and they're right, I suppose. In the wild, polar bears don't really have territories because of the constantly sort of shifting landmass. They spend a lot of their time on ice sheets, basically, which obviously, you know, melt and form. The permafrost changes, but then they do come down and they do spend some time in more tundra biome areas as well. And I was hoping that would be reflected in the game, because most zoo and conservation areas for polar bears are more based around that sort of tundra biome, as opposed to a sort of completely typical Arctic biome, because an Arctic biome is literally a slab of ice. Like that is it. They live on ice sheets, and they dive in for seals, and they come back out again, and there's nothing. But you know, they do, like I say, spend time in tundra areas as well. They nest and they forage a little as well. So all of this, I was hoping would be referenced in the game, and unfortunately it isn't at the moment. So the size being so huge, it didn't actually bother me that much here, because with Nuna Kanata we are building a conservation area, a sort of research and development projects. So they would have the space. You know, it isn't like a typical zoo. And to be honest with you, polar bears in zoos usually often have a really sort of terrible time of it. There are more modern zoos now. There are more modern habitats for polar bears that have done a lot better. But for the most part, they have these awful like indoor areas where there's icebergs painted on the back wall and stuff, and they're really unnatural and horrific, really, in many ways. So it is good of Frontier, in my opinion, to move away from that as best as they can. But I think they do have to remember that they have made a zoo game here and not a conservation area game. And just because in the wild this is how much space they need, or in the ideal situation this is how much space they need, many zoos can't give that. The AZA or the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, pretty much in every single one of their care manuals, when talking about how much space to give an animal, they always say a zoo will never be able to provide enough space for an animal that they would expect in the wild. Never will a zoo be able to give as much space as they want to. But what you can do is make that space interesting, make that space variable, fill it full of enrichment and different things like that. So a lot of zoos now use habitat rotation, so they'll have maybe 2 or 3 habitats for similar animals, and they will rotate them round so they get different experiences in different spaces. And that is how zoos deal with the fact that they're not going to have the room that the animal truly needs. But yeah, here luckily we are in a conservation project, so we can make it massive. Now it is a little big, and actually since building this, they have sort of, I don't want to say backed down, but they have sort of bended to pressure a little, and they've made the habitat requirements about half of what they were, I think. Still pretty big, still going to need a decent space for the polar bears. But yeah, sorry, I'm a little under the weather. I've got a little bit of a cold, and if you've been following my social media, you'll have seen that we got a puppy. She came on the live stream the other day. She's gorgeous. Her name is Indiana, and she's a German Shepherd puppy, and she's an absolute bundle to handle. And yeah, when you get a new puppy, you're in for some sleepless nights while they get settled. So I'm a little tired, which is why there was no video yesterday. I was there was no video yesterday. It was half of just having no sleep from being up with Indiana, and then half of just banging my head against the wall a little bit with this polar bear habitat, because like I say, the size necessarily wasn't really a problem for me. My biggest issue I had was with the foliage choices. Now you'll see here I've made a huge water to try and fill it. I didn't like it, so there's going to be a cut in a minute. Oh, there it is. You'll see I actually halved that water, and there's one large water area there that they can swim down into, which I don't think they do in the game. I think they still just swim on the surface, and then a few smaller pools that sort of tear up, and we're going to get some water features in between them. It was more interesting than just having just one huge swathe of water, Here I'm using the monorail to get a really nice slope down. I'm going to have a sort of tundra wildflower garden that comes down. The good thing about this is that all the points in that path you can look over and see the sort of vista of the polar bear habitat, which is really fantastic. Now in the game, I don't know, I think the guests are going to moan that they can't see the animal too much because there's such a big space, but I think as we look at it from a realistic point of view, I think it's going to look fantastic. Here then, just adding a vent to the bottom of the water here, a grate to the bottom of it for somewhere for them to drain. Obviously it's all for show, this doesn't actually do anything. But yes, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the foliage choices. So if you click on the sort of foliage coverage area for the polar bear, it says that it's happy to have up to 50% foliage coverage, okay? But then it states that it will only have foliage from tundra and taiga biomes. Oh no, sorry, tundra and aquatic, I think it is, which again kind of makes sense. But the continent it states is Arctic. It says that it will only allow plants from the Arctic continent. There are no plants for the Arctic continent in the game. There's no Arctic continent choice. You can't actually select Arctic continents as one of the choices. So basically, any plant you place down in the game, whether it's tundra or aquatic or what, any plant you place down in the game, the polar bear is not happy about it. So I stopped playing at this point and kind of tried to do a bit of research and looked at some real life places and spoke to some people online as well as to about whether or not, and yeah, a lot of zoos don't have any foliage in them. If you look, they're just sort of large, well, they're not even that large, but they're stone spaces with sort of plaster that is made to look like ice. They very rarely have real ice because obviously it's very difficult to keep, especially outdoors. So they often just have like concrete spaces, and that isn't really what we wanted to do here in Nuna Kanata. It's meant to be natural spaces that have been adjusted to keep an animal in. So yeah, but looking into it, I found a animal reserve, a polar bear reserve in northern Canada that I have just, for some silly reason, closed the documents about. So I'm going to bring it back up. Hold on one second. It's north of me here, but like way north actually. And they there have lots of tundra-style enclosures for the bears, and they also have some Arctic ones as well, which is basically just snow. They're high up enough to pretty much be able to keep snow all year round. But they move them between the 2 or the 3 habitats, just like polar bears in real life do. I'm going to have to find it. You have to bear with me while we put down some rocks. A lot of rock work in this video, because that's pretty much all we can do. There we go, the Canadian polar bear habitat, and it is in... where does it say it is? It's something like Kachunga or something. Ganuk. Oh no, that's the name of the animal. Hold on. Then more. Here we go. Cochrane. There we go. Sorry, Kachunga's miles away. Cochrane polar bear habitat. I'll put a link in the description to it. It's fantastic. Looks great. They have some really beautiful bears, and they seem to be kept really well. But they have a lot of space there where there's trees around. So again, a little bit of research. Turns out polar bears are quite happy with sort of firs, pines, grasses, moss, all that sort of stuff. They don't really bother with it. They have no problem with it being around. So that's what we're going for here. This is actually the first one I've seen in the game so far, polar bear habitat, that has no snow in it, because I really wanted to kind of get that idea of there is snow when it snows, and not necessarily because the game wants you to put some down, because that's just not very realistic. It's very difficult to keep snow down when the temperature isn't right for it, unless you're building completely indoors, and even then it's still quite tricky to get that sort of stuff there and happy. So luckily they have made it so that the polar bear doesn't need snow. They can have it, but they don't need a certain amount of snow. But yeah, the foliage, unfortunately, all of the foliage, when you look at the polar bears requirements on the foliage, all of it's red, but it doesn't actually take down the overall percentage, and I'm guessing that's because it's the right biome and just not the right country or area, I suppose. So the game lets you know it's not right, but it doesn't actually pull down the overall percentage. So even though this isn't Arctic foliage, it kind of, here you'll see me looking there and figuring out what's going on, but you'll see me as I place them down, I leave that open. I do for a part of it. Yeah, this is me really trying to figure out what's going on. Then there was a cut there, which is where I go and read about it. So here you go. I kept it open purposely so we can see. So everything we place down here, the bull reeds and all that sort of stuff, it's red. But you'll see at the top there, it only very, very slightly takes down the overall percentage of the foliage, and therefore turns out in the end that it's actually quite happy about it, and we're all good. Having such a large space like this, with no foliage in, I'll be honest with you, I just couldn't think of a way of making it look nice. It would literally have just been a big lump of snow, a big circle of snow in the middle of this park, and that just isn't what we're going for here in Nuna Kanata. We really want this to be a bit more natural. So as far as the actual habitat goes, my idea behind it is that it has been excavated a bit to create a sort of almost like a pit, but I really want to make it not look like a pit. But the idea is that it has been sort of excavated out of the ground, and it is all man-made, but man-made to look very natural, and it uses local stone and things like that. But you'll see there, the largest pool there is actually concrete on the bottom to help with cleaning and drainage and things like that. But I really wanted to try and keep this as naturalistic as possible. I think that is the word they use in zoos, that sort of man-made, but to look natural. And that's really what I was trying to go for here with the rock work. So the rock work's very sort of blocky and shaped like they've sort of brought in slabs and placed them down. But at the back here, I wanted it to sort of really tear into what will become just forest, because this is the edge of the park as far as we're going this way. You'll see there's a train track going around the back there. That's because we want a train to go from the start of the zoo over to this area where there's going to be polar bears and wolves. Unfortunately, I did hear that some of the transport can just go back and forth. The train isn't one of those, unfortunately, so we do have to make it a loop. So at the moment, it just loops right around the back. Probably going to sink that in, hide it with some trees and things like that, because I do want to make it look like it's just like a there and back train to take you over to the Grizzlies. To the polar bears and the wolves, which I think we're going to go for both wolves, timber and Arctic, because, why not? We've got plenty of room. Last bit of rock work then as we go in, and then we'll do a bit of glamour shots. So pretty much, because this took so long and because I had to spend so long researching it and figuring out what was going on, the whole sort of guest-facing part of the habitat just hasn't happened. So that will be the next episode. We'll do the viewing areas. We'll do the underwater viewing area. Hopefully by then, Indiana's sleeping through the night and I'm getting a bit more rest. I can get back to normal. Apologies for no video yesterday. It's you can blame her, but she's cute, so you know we can't blame her that bad, can we? Thank you so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Until the next one, be good.